Hello, I'm Edward Tarte. This is the 27th in my series of weekly videos for friendlyatheist.com. In June 1963, just out of the seminary, aged 28 and a newly ordained priest, I began my first priestly assignment as one of two assistant pastors at a church in a wealthy part of Houston, Texas. The other new assistant pastor I had known as a fellow seminarian, ordained to the priesthood a couple of years before me. He had spent 2 years at a parish church north of Houston, where the pastor would scarcely let him do anything except say Mass and hear confessions. This young priest, about my age, was delighted to have this new assignment, and I was excited about my first assignment. He and I got along extremely well. He was a kind of mentor to me as I felt my way along. Our pastor was a genial, middle-aged man. In the priest's residence, called the rectory, next to the church, downstairs I had an office, and upstairs I had a 2-room suite with private bath. There was a common recreation room upstairs with a big TV set, and within a few months, my beloved piano, shipped over from my parents' home 90 miles away. Not the piano that you see now in my piano videos. 6.5 days a week we had a good cook, a good breakfast, a light lunch at noon, and a full dinner at 5 p.m. I understood that I must not eat anything for 2 hours before giving myself Holy Communion at Mass, or I might go to hell, or at least spend some time suffering in purgatory. And I understood likewise that I must eat smaller than usual breakfasts and lunches during the season of Lent, or suffer punishment after death. My room and board were all paid for by the people of the parish. My most important priestly duty was to say Mass every day, twice or 3 times on Sunday. I used what we all understood as my magical powers to change bread and wine into the real body and blood of Jesus. I supposedly ate Jesus' flesh and drank his blood daily at Mass, and at every Mass I gave out Jesus' supposed flesh to parishioners for them to eat. I earned $4 every time I said Mass, paid by parishioners who, each for $2, had asked me to offer the Mass as a prayer for a dead loved one who might be suffering in purgatory, so that God would shorten his or her time there and bring him or her to heaven sooner. On Saturday afternoons and evenings, and at various other times during the week, I heard confessions, using what we all understood was my priestly power to forgive people's sins. I had to whisper very softly in the confessional because the acoustics there were terrible, and the person waiting on the other side could possibly hear me talking to the current sinner. Hearing confessions was for me mostly quite boring, but I was supposedly acting as an effective mediator between each sinner and Jesus. We were taught in the seminary very forcefully that we must never reveal to anyone what we heard in confession, even if a murder or mass murders or a much more serious event such as a war could be averted. The pastor put me in charge of the altar boys. I never did anything sexually improper with any of them or with anyone else. The pastor, knowing that I was a musician, also put me in charge of the choir. He also put me in charge of typing the weekly Sunday bulletin and running off the copies on the mimeographing machine. Every Monday morning I spent 2 hours or more helping count the money collected during the Masses the previous day. We priests took turns preaching at Sunday Masses. My turn to preach came up about once every 3 weeks. I took this preaching assignment very seriously. I carefully prepared every sermon during the preceding week. I practiced it over and over in my room. The other priests of the parish did not do that. They mostly improvised, something that I could never do. The pastor himself was not a good preacher, and he realized that. He frequently complimented me on the quality of my sermons. I preached about Jesus, God, original sin, baptism, the Mass, Holy Communion, and many other topics, being scrupulously faithful always to Catholic doctrine. Once I preached on marriage. Looking back on it, I am amazed at my arrogance in preaching to married people on a topic about which I knew virtually nothing. I preached these things to my captive audience, people of all ages from adult to young child, who understood that they had to be there at Mass every Sunday or they would go to hell. Once a week I took communion to a man at his home who was dying of cancer. Once I went to a parishioner's home in the middle of the night to try to talk her out of killing herself, and apparently I was successful. I quickly became a respected member of the parish community. I had been told in the seminary that as a parish priest I would be extremely busy. I was not. I had plenty of time to mumble each day in Latin the 75 minutes of required priest's prayers known as the Divine Office, understanding that if I deliberately omitted even one day of those prayers, I would go to hell. We priests never discussed Catholic doctrine in our residence. Certain issues that are very important to me now that I am an atheist never came up in those priestly days. Issues such as the problem of suffering, the horribly evil God of the Bible, gay rights, evolution versus intelligent design, giving solid evidence that there is a God, that the Bible was divinely authored, that the Catholic Church has any legitimate authority whatsoever. I was in a religious bubble, a very special priestly bubble. 2.5 years into my priesthood, the bubble was penetrated slightly for the first time. Eventually, I escaped from the bubble. So did my fellow assistant pastor. Many of my fellow seminarians and priests escaped also. Others did not. Today, priests and other religious ministers and their followers are in religious bubbles. As I document in some of my YouTube videos, I have been trying to invade some of those bubbles. In those efforts, I often feel very frustrated. To all of you, thank you for watching this video.